Shalom. So what is the Torah and why is it so important? To begin, the Torah is the first 5 books of the Bible, written by Moshe Rabbeinu, Moses our teacher. And it's the guidelines, the instructions, the wisdom, the knowledge of God, Hashem, for human beings, the blueprints of how to live. It's not just for the Jews, although it was given to them at Mount Sinai, but it's for all peoples. So we begin in Exodus 19, from verse 3. Moshe ascended to God, and Hashem called to him from the mountain, saying, So shall you say to the house of Jacob and relate. The house of Jacob is Israel. So the children of Israel, you have seen what I did to Egypt, and that I have borne to you on the wings of eagles and brought you to me. And now if you hearken well to my voice and observe my covenant, you shall be to me the most beloved treasure of all peoples, for mine is the entire world. You shall be to me a kingdom of ministers, Kohanim, the priests, and a holy nation. These are the words you shall speak to in Israel. And then it's like a marriage covenant, alright? You know, the Jewish marriage, there is the chuppah, the covering. Well, it doesn't say which, when they were in the wilderness, there was a covering, the cloud by day, and a pillar of fire by night. And also, they're saying their vows. God was saying, look, I'll protect you, bless you, provide for you. But in return, you have to be faithful to this, this, and this. That's the Torah. It's like a marriage contract with God. It continues on to verse 20 and stuff like that. And, God is saying, this is the covenant, here's your part. We're going to be in this together, working together. But if you ignore it, if you turn away from it, then I'm going to pull out, alright? Because God isn't a very long-term abusive relationship. Let's be very honest, between humans and God, going back to Adam and Eve. Alright, so He made the covenants, but the covenants God never broke the covenants. It's always been Israel that's broken the covenants. But that's for a later discussion. But God is faithful. Look, He says He'll return Israel in its own land today. And the Jews are back home. Not all, the rest will come, but they're still getting there. Now, people talk about end days and what happens at the end. We go to Malachi 3. We start off at verse 22. So it's talking about the end, alright? This is the very end of this season, as in the world. Alright, he's saying, for the day is coming, burn like a furnace, when all the proud and evildoers will stumble. The day that is coming will set them ablaze, says Adonai Sevaot, which is Lord above all lords. We go down and it says, remember the Torah of Moshe, my servant, which I enjoined on him at Horeb, laws and rulings for all Israel. Look, I will send to you the prophet Eliyahu, I will send to you Eliyahu, Elijah the prophet, before the coming of the great and terrible day of Adonai. He will turn the hearts of their fathers to their children, and the hearts of children to their fathers. Otherwise I will come and strike the land with complete destruction. Plus, if you read it in the Torah too, what I'm getting at here, that these laws and regulations, they don't just disappear. It goes on to the end. And if you read, it says it for all generations, many of them. So this is not something that's seasonal, it's something that's there for the long term. And if you go to Ecclesiastes, which is where Solomon is given all of his life wisdom, and how, life is basically unfair, it can be very unpredictable, things like this. It's, there are righteous people who don't, how life would imagine, if you're righteous, well, everything must work out and be blessed. But Solomon says it's not always like that. Yes, it happens, But it's not 100% always going to be like that. And sometimes the wicked prosper. But then Solomon says, well, that too is vanity, because the wicked will, in the end, not see a good ending. Let's find it real quick. We're almost there. And also in Ecclesiastes, Solomon is really, he's reached the pinnacle. He's at the high point, If you read the way he built up Israel and Yerushalayim, he saw what the max, put it this way, he's on the highest hill, alright? He was king, you might even say emperor of Israel, because they had subjugated other peoples in the land. So he was at the high point, very wealthy, very powerful. I mean, he even had all the guards of the palace shields of gold. And it talks about that, I think, said gold was like silver or something like that, some type of other lesser metal. And he was at the high point, and he's sitting at the high point, and he's writing about life. This is vanity, that is vanity. But in the end, I mean, he kept building and constructing and stuff, so. But he's just saying that to put all your focus in these things, that so much in life is vanity, it's all going to pass away eventually. But here's the final conclusion after all this wisdom he gives. Kohelet, Ecclesiastes 12:13. Here's the final conclusion. Now that you've heard everything, fear God, and keep His mitzvot, His commandments. This is what being human is all about. For God will bring a judgment to everything we do. Everything secret, whether good or bad. So he says this is for all mankind, and furthermore he expands. This is what being human is all about. Which, modern day humanism is very secular, and they don't speak of this stuff at all. And he says human, thinking about humans, it's natural to always progress. If you have a job, it's natural to progress. If you're learning something, you want to progress. In a relationship, a friendship, you're with your best friends, your lover, your family, your parents, there's a progression, and people want progression to increase over time. This is natural, and it is good. Granted, doesn't become obsessive, because alright, to increase knowledge is good, but to be obsessed with knowledge and only knowledge and not God, well, you're making an idol out of knowledge, as with many other things in life. But he's saying about the progression, because this is what human beings are all about. So don't just progress in these other areas, progress in your relationship with God and the mitzvah, the commandments. So if you're a Jew, and you were raised that way religiously, you know the Torah and what it means to be a man or a woman at your bar or bat mitzvah when you're about 12 or 13. And you know the commandments. So for you, it's progressing in your relationship and knowledge and wisdom of God and expressing it to the world. Whereas if you're a Gentile and you never grew up this way, well, he's talking about you here, because it's for all mankind. So the progression, you learn the commandments, you learn basically how to advance your relationship with God, because you have faith, and of course faith requires works. They go hand in hand together. And so it's for mankind to keep learning, to keep progressing, as we do in all areas, but he's talking about the mitzvah, the commandments of God, So that's very deep on his part, I'm going to go over here to Yeshayahu, Isaiah 11. Uno momento. I mean, I'm flipping through Tehillim, Psalms at the moment. If you look at Psalms, David, so much is about the Torah. He says stuff like, oh, I hate the evil